Hey, folks. Welcome to the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast. This podcast is hosted and sponsored by Lost Creek Wholesale, your universal feeder distributor in U.S. and Canada. My name's Leon Gaiman, and I'm with Lost Creek Wholesale. I also have along with me my co-host, Matt Nault from Glenbrook Farms in Leola, Pennsylvania. Our goal with this podcast is to bring to our listeners production-oriented information that will help you make your flocks and herds more profitable. Thanks for being one of our listeners, and stay tuned for today's episode. Welcome to today's episode. Today we have a special guest, Kelsey Keeling from Balanced Ruminate Grazers. Kelsey and her husband have a flock of Australian whites. She also has a podcast called Feed My Sheep and a YouTube channel. So in this episode today with Kelsey, it's going to kind of be the beginning of a series, you could say, where we're planning to mix a few of these episodes in here in the future. We're going to do some breed highlights. So we have a lot of listener questions coming in, and questions like, what breed should I start with? And why did you pick the breed you did, etc. So today we're going to look at Australian whites with Kelsey. Her and her husband started with them a few years ago, and we're going to take a dive into that and see what we can learn. So glad to have you here today, Kelsey.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat sheep. It's something that I love to do, and I can talk on the phone to people for hours. So it'll be exciting to talk to you guys.
This is a place where we get carried away talking about sheep, that's for sure. So Kelsey, you have Australian whites, and that's what we would like to hear about today. So to get started, maybe you want to give us a little background on how you got into sheep, and then tell us about these Australian whites.
Yeah. So we're in South Central Kansas, 40 miles west of Wichita. I'm originally from Northeast Kansas, but my husband lived on this farm, and we have a little less than a section, so 560 acres that we're working with. We've done cow-calf so far, but now we're transitioning to sheep. And so 4 years ago, we got into sheep. We wanted to add sheep originally with the cows, and then decided that we wanted to fully transition from cows to sheep. But we got Katahdins, had watched Greg Judy's stuff and all the regenerative ag stuff, and thought Katahdins would be a good base. So we started with that. And then, of course, you get ewes, but then you need a ram. And so we were like, I don't know what we're going to get. And so we ended up, long story short, we went and got a dog from a guy, and he had an Australian white ram, and we're like, well, we'll go ahead and give it a try, and try out this breed. And we have fallen in love with it. And since then we have, some full bloods on the farm, but we started with our, 50% our F1s. And I mean, they just look a lot different than a Katahdin, and I don't know, perform a lot different, and we fell in love with them. So
very, very good. So when you started, you bought the ram, but you're doing something with some point. I'd like to hear about your embryo. Did you use some flushing, or did you buy in embryos maybe?
We bought in embryos. So we had bought that first ram and did him. We only started with 25 ewes. And so it was small. We could put him on that for 2 years, just because our ewes were growing, and so we weren't everybody wasn't breeding fully. But we were faced with the choice of, okay, we need another ram. Well, unfortunately, I don't know, there's not a lot of Australian whites in the United States yet, so they're quite pricey. And we're like, well, we could either go buy another ram, which is quite expensive, or we could give it a try and do these embryo transfers. And so we ended up, with the price of it, bought only 6, which was the same price as a full blood ram that we could have bought. And we ended up going 6 for 6 on our embryo transfers. I don't know if you guys have done embryo transfer work. It's for the faint of heart. It's it's laparoscopic. Okay. So I think goats, you can do some of it AI. I don't know exactly, like cattle. We came from the cattle world, so we're like, oh, perfect, I can get certified or whatever in doing this, and then we can just do it on the farm. No. You have to take them to the vet. The vet literally has to do a surgery on them. And so it was, I don't know, it was a learning curve for sure. But we, I guess, felt good enough to do it again this year. So we just did it this past Friday again.
What is your success rate usually? Do you know with embryo transplants? I know I've looked into it a little bit, but what 6 for 6 I know is really good. But what were you what were you hoping for, preparing for, kind of with that?
Yeah. So everybody else that's in our association, and that's the AAWSBA's, the American Australian White Sheep Breeders Association. I can give you a link to them. But they have been buying 20, if not more, embryos and transferring them. We were like, well, this is all that we can afford as a startup. And so we were hoping for 4 out of 6, and the 6 for 6 were crazy.
Yeah.
Good. But I think the success rate is it'll vary. But I think it's 40 to 60%. I would say more on the 40% side.
Yeah.
It's just not there. Just with this last group of embryos that we did on Friday, we found out the hard way that there are a lot of things that have to go right for that embryo to make it all the way. So these are being sent from Australia to the United States, and they are being housed at RSG in Indiana with the association that we're a part of, and then they will send them. Well, we purchased them and then had them sent down to Kansas. But I mean, you're talking a little embryo getting sent all the way from Australia with all these other embryos, but the freezing process, the thawing process, the shipping, there are so many steps that have to go right. And that's just on the embryo side. That's not even on the sheep side of all the stuff that we have to do as sheep producers to get that ewe ready for embryo transfer. So this last time it didn't go this last Friday. Some things happened and it just didn't go as well as we planned. So yeah, that's going to happen though.
Yeah. Keep your fingers crossed and see what the outcome is. Yeah. We have done some AI work, which is somewhat similar but not as complicated. So I'm a little bit familiar, but it's an interesting world once you get into that.
Yeah. Did you do it with fresh semen or with frozen?
We did both.
Okay.
Most of it was with frozen semen. We did use some fresh semen, we were doing it kind of as a trial. We did buy in some semen, so we had reasons to do it, but we were also kind of doing it just as a trial, see what kind of success rate we can get. So we had some frozen semen, and we also collected one of our rams and used it to AI or use, which seems kind of pointless, but like I said, it was a kind of a trial thing.
Yeah.
And the success rate was slightly better with fresh semen, but not dramatically.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. We might be doing AI work. I got to talk my husband into it because that's a whole thing to doing flushing and all that maybe this fall, but they're sold per unit. And I don't know, I need to ask more questions on the semen straws, how much semen is in a unit. But did you just buy 1 unit per ewe, or do you put more in? I don't know how that goes.
It's 1 unit per ewe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So 1 unit will cover 2. 1 unit is 1 straw and it'll cover 1 ewe.
Okay.
So they put half of the, if I remember right, they put half of it on the one horn, if I'm saying that right.
Oh, okay.
One horn of the uterus, and the other half on the other horn.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, they only use 1 straw per.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Yeah. The other part of all this is, those straws are being brought over that have the embryos, but that straw is full of embryo genetics from a specific ewe. So it's not like you get 4 embryos in that straw that all have separate genetics.
Yeah.
And so with our 6 that we got, we didn't know, you could always say, I want 1 of each genetic diversity that you guys are bringing over from Australia. They're not going to let you do that. Plus there's more than 1 embryo per straw, but we got 5 of 1 straw, and then the other straw had 1 different set of genetics.
Okay.
And a God thing for sure, we got a ram out of that one. Yeah, it was so crazy. I went out to go check, and we knew which ewe it was in, which was great. But and she was I think one of the last ones. I think she had scanned in that she was pregnant, but I went out there and just, tears in my eyes that it was a ram, and I was like, oh my goodness, like so excited. So
So are you putting one embryo per ewe?
yeah, that's what we did. And
Okay.
I've been trying to track that on my YouTube just to show people what we do. Not that I mean,
Sure.
this last time was our second time doing it, so I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just showing people like the steps and the thought process behind what we're doing. But we just put one in, I don't know, like hoping that she'd take care of one better than it would two, or accept one better more than two. That's not real sciencey, but
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I was just curious how they do that. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What you would have had your recipient use that these went into, you would have had a protocol to put them through to set them up for the transplant as well. Probably similar to what, I mean, I'm sure it's a different, but probably somewhat similar to an AI protocol where you're synchronizing that you and all that. Was
Yeah.
that pretty intense or?
No, actually, so the biggest thing with us, and we'll have to figure this out this fall if we end up doing AI work with more ewes. But since we only had the 6, we actually did all the protocol on 8 ewes, because our vet was like, okay, if you show up here and we thaw out, whatever, if there would have been, well, what ended up happening was we did the protocol on 8, and then if one wasn't in heat, then we would have skipped over her and put it into another, or we would have put twins, if we would add multiple. Our ewes were all fine, and they were all in heat both last year and then this year. But was I going with that? But
Yeah, it's just a program to
yeah.
set them up.
Yeah, so it is very easy. I mean, our biggest thing was that we had to pull them out away from each other, is what we did, and put them in like a little sheep tractor. It'd be kind of like a chicken tractor, but enough room for them to walk around. We pull it with a tractor and move it twice a day. They have food and water in there, and then they can graze. We're more pasture based than putting things in lots and stuff. We just don't have the facilities for that. But we did that protocol on all 8 of those ewes, and it was super easy. Pulled them out a month before, and I think it was like 3 weeks. I should know my protocol, but put cedars in. Then a while later did PG 600, if I'm saying that right, and then pulled cedars and did luteolase.
Okay.
And then a week later we did the embryo transfer.
Similar to what we would have done for AI.
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
that. So
That's so we have 3 full blood ewes. They all have the same like ewe and ram. So they're all the same genetics, which isn't ideal. But we thought about flushing them with 3 separate ram genetics.
yeah.
And trying to AI them. But, with 3 ewes, they'll be a year old in April. So they won't be that old. I'm wondering how many embryos we'd get from them. Like max, I'd say maybe 20 out of those 3. But I'm like thinking about doing protocol on 20 ewes. I'm like, oh, 60 sounds terrible when you're a newbie.
Yeah.
So
you could also freeze those for a later time period if you want. And from what I've heard, you might get 3 out of one, and you might get 15 or 20 out of one. It can really vary.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's all interesting stuff. That embryo transfer and flushing is something that I've checked into, and Matt did AI now. That's the closest he came to it, but it's something I was still intrigues me and would like to do at some point in time. So can you tell us, how does this breed up program work? So the Katahdin Association, I mean, we have what you could call a breed up program. We have, you can start with anything and breed to a Katahdin ram and have percentages, and and then get 100% paper. But how does the Australian white do it?
They're still working on it, from what I understand. We're so very new. I mean, like within 2 to 3 years, they decided to go ahead and do their own registry system. So we're just getting registered animals here within the next year. They're going to start the registry system. But so I can't really speak to all of it. I don't know how they're going to do like the papering, if it's always, well, I mean, it would always be a pure blood and then full blood. I'm sure that's how they say it in the cattle industry. Is that how they do it with Katahdins as well? Like,
No.
no?
It's-
Oh, really?
With Katahdins, once you're to the 100% Katahdin, they don't differentiate at all. The Dorpers do. The white Dorpers do, like you were saying, you have the purebred and the full blood.
Yeah.
And the first time somebody asked me, I have some white Dorpers as well as Katahdins. The first time someone asked me if mines are purebred or full blood, I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't even know anything about it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So
But
the Katahdin breed, we can breed any breed to a registered Katahdin ram. First cross 50%. You can get a recorded paper, they call it. It's a different color, looks slightly different, but it's recorded at 50%. Breed that offspring to a registered ram, it's 75%. Breed that offspring to a registered ram, it's 87.5%.
Mm-hmm.
If that 87.5% animal passes a shedding, like a hair coat inspection,
Okay.
the summer it's a year old. Like it has to be between May and September, I believe.
Mm.
If it passes a hair coat inspection, you can get 100% paper for it.
Okay. Was that at F3?
It would be F3. It'd be 87.5. It'd be the third.
yeah,
One.
yeah, F3.
Okay.
Yeah, the F3 could be.
Okay.
And there's no
inspection.
Yeah, so it's technically 87.5, but as long as if it passes their hair coat inspection, they will switch the paper to 100%. I tell people it's basically I think open book registry is the right term.
Yeah.
Like the Paint Horse Association, I think, is still an open book. It's a way that there's pros and cons to operating that way, I guess. From a breed's perspective.
What does the open book mean? So
a closed book would mean that there can never be any outside influence. No blood. Okay. No outside blood can be brought in. Mm-hmm. That's my interpretation. Does that sound right, Matt?
Yeah, it does. And I was just thinking about that, like what the Dorpers are doing, if they would. I don't know if they'd still call that an open book, because you have your full bloods and your purebreds. So you can bring in some new genetics, but they can never get to the would it be the purebred status, I think. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know what they call that then, if they would call that an open book or if they have a different name for it. But they're, you can't necessarily bring in any new genetics to the same level as the original breed.
Mm-hmm. That's what I don't know exactly what, like, I'd have to pull up their breed standards that they're doing right now on the association, but that's what I think they're going towards, that they want the breed to become, we have to have a breed up program, because you're not going to be able to, everybody do embryo transfer to get all these Australian whites in the United States. That doesn't sound like it's going to happen, but I know that they want to do the best to keep the breed as best as they can to what Graham Gilmore and Tati Keel in Australia wanted it. I know that they are, I think it was F7 for rams. It's pretty high for their breed up. And I think it was F5s for ewes to be purebred. Purebred, is that? Matt, is that right?
Yeah.
Saying,
Yeah.
okay.
Full
I know
blood.
it's
Well,
So
yeah, I don't know if they'll call it purebreds or full blood.
full
And
blood
I
would.
actually I'm confusing myself now, which
I
is
know that's
um
full blood would be full blood that they like originally
the
came from
original.
Tatikil in
Yeah,
Australia.
yeah, I
And I
believe
know
so.
that they all have to have a sire like from Australia to
Okay,
be a full blood.
okay.
But yeah,
so
I'd have to look into that more on the F3s and stuff for the Catan and the Dorper, I wonder. But yeah, I think that it's F5 right now for ewes and then F7 for rams.
folks, just wanted to take a quick break here and remind you about the spring sale and event Matt's having at his farm there in Leola, Pennsylvania, Glenbrook Farms. March 22nd, he's having his spring sale and educational event. Planning to have some sheep there for sale that day. Also planning to have several educational topics going on, as well as some equipment demonstrations like handling, facility demonstrations, etc. If you'd like information on that, feel free to reach out to me at 717-310-3641, or you can send me an email, leon@lostcreekwholesale.net, and we can get you a sale catalog, event program, etc. Thanks again for tuning in. So could you talk a little bit about, I mean, Matt and I are both somewhat biased to the Katahdins, but that's okay.
Yeah.
We actually have, this is the first of several episodes that we are going to look at. This is something our listeners just were kind of throwing it out there to you, but we would like to cover several breeds. We take listener questions, and we have this question that came up several times now, Dorper versus Katahdin.
Yeah.
We kind of decided we're going to highlight different breeds. Let's hear the pros and cons of them, and then the listeners can take that information and draw their own conclusions.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're somewhat biased to the Katahdins, but there's a lot of things that, I mean, I tell people all the time to use Dorper rams in a commercial flock on Katahdin ewes because you get hybrid vigor. I have some friends actually that are using the Australian white rams on Katahdin ewes, and they like the cross. So what made you lean toward the Australian white over the Katahdins you started with? It's just, yeah, go ahead and pick the Katahdins apart a little bit. What do you see in the Australian whites that you like better?
Well, I love that you guys are doing that because I'm still new. I'm 4 years into this. I don't know how long you guys have been into sheep, way longer than me, I'm sure. But as a new sheep producer, you need to kind of figure out what you want in each breed or like what each breed can bring to the table. And then I always tell people on my YouTube channel, I'm like, you have to know your end goal of what you're trying to do. You know, are you trying to, put weight on them as fast as you can? Well, then a St. Croix is probably not going to be I mean, with my limited knowledge on sheep, 4 years, like you're not going to want a St. Croix, you're going to want more of a Dorper. I when we went to go get our ram, I don't know when with being in Kansas, we were like, well, we could probably get a good ram for like $500, and these Australian whites, whatever, 2-3 years ago, it was $2,000 to get this ram, and I mean that's a lot of money for a low cost sheep input thing, and so we're like, well, $1,500 difference on taking a chance on this new breed that's coming to the United States. Like, let's go ahead and just take the chance. And, if we get a few years into it and we don't like him, then we can always go back to a Katahdin. But I think it was more just the size difference, like the body size of the Australian white that we liked. And then everything that we had heard from our research from Tati Keel on the breed is kind of what sold us. With your guys' Katahdins, what are your goals with that? I mean, are you trying to push more motherly instinct and get more lambs on the ground, that 20 percentage, or, what are your guys' goals, or why do you like the Katahdins?
It's a good question. So, and Matt, I'll give you can chip in here then, but So the traits that I look at first, probably. So Matt and I both have our flocks in the National Sheep Improvement Program. So we have EBVs on them, which EBVs are not an end all, they're not a fix all. It's a tool that we can use for selection. But probably weaning weight, post weaning weight, and number of lambs born and weaned. It's probably the most important things to me. Then we could talk about things like parasite resistance, mothering instinct. And yes, they have to take care of 2 lambs. I mean, if you can't count to 2, that's a problem. I mean, we all know, at least I haven't met many shepherds yet that can make things pencil really good with 1. Now, there's some range flocks. I have some guys I know in California that they're good with 1 lamb. That's a little different type of management system. But for the way we do it, they got to have 2. It's the only way it works.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, for us, that's probably the main thing that we really like about the Katahdins is that ability to wean around a 200% lamb crop, possibly 180, 200%, depends on your genetics and program and what time of year. And I would say the same, like for us, it's for a commercial flock in our area, it's really hard to pencil with, like a 150% lamb crop. That's going to be hard to pencil that out for us. So that would be the primary thing. They got to have 2 lambs and raise them. So our selection criteria is probably looking at number of lambs born and weaned first of all, maternal milk, and then growth. Something along, I don't know. I would say that gets a little mixed in. Like there's certain things like there's no reason to have a bad growth EBV. We have plenty of good growth EBV lambs. So, we kind of make that a standard. It's got to be at least good. And then from there we can keep pushing those other traits up. So that would be our main thing with the Katahdins is we want those twins.
Well, the reason we love that about the Katahdins as well, the parasite resistance, the mothering, and that's why we chose them as a base for our breed up program. But the Australian white is not known for twinning.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that we can cull for that in our breed up program. But they are also known for putting on body size, which we've seen that with our F1 crosses. And hopefully we'll see that continue from what I hear with other sheep producers that have F2s, F3s. They're seeing that body, keep on them, that they have a good stout body size like a Dorper would. But they put on weight faster than a Katahdin would. And I'm still trying to navigate, figuring out, because we're in Kansas, and so we lamb in May, and then our market's not really until January through April. Well, these Australian whites are going to be ready, or if they do what they say they're going to do, then they'll be ready way before that. And so we're trying to navigate that, okay, well, what's our market going to be? Is it going to be more of instead of taking them to the sale barn and getting whatever we get in August, October, when they're ready, are we going to try to take them to Superior? Are we going to try to finish them a little bit heavier and take them there? So as a new sheep producer, I'm all ears trying to figure out what makes sense.
Have you lambed any of these Australian white ewes yet?
Just our embryo transfers we had. So we have 3 full-blood girls that were born in April, and they are bred, and so they'll be lambing here in May.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how they do, how you like them as moms compared to the Katahdins. I mean, from what I hear from the breed and with the way Australia runs their sheep, I would expect them to be good moms and take care of their lambs really well, which the Dorpers do well with that too. I find They do really well with taking care of their lambs. They just don't have quite as many as the Katahdins. So, but yeah, that's interesting.
Are you guys taking yours to the sale barn then, and then just having them sent to the East Coast?
We are in the East Coast.
You are? Okay, okay. So like
I'm 5
you
miles
guys,
from New Holland.
okay, okay.
The
Yeah.
New Holland sale barn. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest sheep and goat auctions in the country almost. I guess it's bigger than San Antonio.
I think it is now. For a long time we said it's one of the biggest, but I think the last I checked, they were typically, and it probably varies from the time of year, but they were usually running more head through a week than the other one was. Yeah.
So are you able to take your Katahdins in year round whenever you feel like they're, and what's your target weight then to take them in at? If you don't mind me asking.
Typically I'm targeting for 100 pounds.
Okay.
Now when we do an accelerated lambing program. So we're lambing 3 times a year. And so we're selling lambs year round pretty much. Obviously, we're watching the holidays, different times of years, the prices are different and so forth. But we're pretty consistent with that 100-pound lamb. So
in very few instances have I found that it works to sell on the lightweight market.
Yeah.
Only if you're getting $3.50 a pound.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're watching the market right now is the light lambs are really good right now. I don't know if you've been following the market at all, but the light lambs are really good. I expect that will change as we get into Ramadan is coming up the end of February here. So I expect those heavy lambs will pick up. But those light lambs are really selling good right now. But I'm still sitting on my fall lambs. I still think we're not. I mean, we have some that are up to weight, but for the group, we're not quite there yet. And I'm just expecting those heavy lambs to go up with the Ramadan holiday. So our difference is. So we're getting our lambs to that 100 pounds in about 4 months, but that's putting them in the barn on feed. So we're getting them there pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But different program.
Are you putting a Dorper ram on those Katahdins or just a Katahdin ram?
So most of us, we sell mostly seed stock. So most of ours are purebreds. We do some crossbreeding, but we can get a Katahdin, we can get a Dorper, we can even get a Ruminate cross to 100 pounds at about 4 months old. It'll vary a little bit, but we like between the Katahdins and Dorpers, we don't see much difference in gains. Now I should say that's our Katahdin flock's been selected for good gains for 10 plus years. Our Katahdins we've been in more recent. The Dorpers we've been in more recently. So we don't quite have the breeding program on them that we do on the Katahdins. But I'm personally somewhat interested in the Australian whites. So it's fun to hear what they can do.
Yeah. I wish I could. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I wish I could speak more on the weight stuff. I'm just as a new sheep producer, I'm just so not able to speak on all of that.
Well, and they are relatively new a new breed in general. I was just looking on the website here. And it looks like in 2011 is when the breed was formed in Australia, and in 2018 is when they first came to the States. So they're relatively new to the States here. So
Yeah.
So I
would
was
you?
gonna say,
Yeah.
I was just gonna go ahead, Matt.
Would you have you looked at Dorpers at all? Would you be able to talk to uh, what differences you might see from the Australian whites compared to Dorpers?
I, from what I hear with Dorpers in our area, is parasite loads.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I was just talking to somebody the other day. I was like, I can't talk bad about Dorpers if I've never really been around one.
Uh-huh.
So I wish I knew more, but I mean, we don't worm our sheep, and we've only spot treated a few of them with the Katahdin base, and we haven't wormed our Australian whites at all. And I always look back at where they're coming from. You know, they're coming from dry climate, like, you know, I feel like they're going to be fine on our climate with, or our forage with parasite load. So,
So we sell the universal feeder here at Lost Creek, which is out of Australia, and the Australians were over here back in, I guess it was February a year ago, and we got to talking some. The owners of the company used to own a sheep stud, like they call them in Australia. And Matt, they talked to you some too, didn't they? They were talking about, so they got to watch firsthand the Dorper breed and kind of where it went, what it was and what it is now. And they put a really good word in for these Australian whites. Matt, how did Ben say that?
I know the three things that he listed as better in the Australian whites than in the Dorper were my three main gripes that I have with the Dorpers, and that was
Okay.
was feet. Dorpers do just have more feet issues. I mean, there's definitely good Dorpers out there that don't have that problem, but just as a breed as whole, they do have more feet problems. The next was shedding. There is Dorpers out there that don't shed as well as they should. And actually, if you're showing Dorpers, you're allowed to shear them before a show. And to me, that just seems really crazy that you're allowed to do that, which is obviously going to lead to more Dorpers that don't shed out like they should. So that was one thing. And then the size. Some of the Dorpers are just getting a little bit too small, just not enough frame to put a lot of meat on the carcasses. Of course, it depends, what your market is and so forth. But those would have kind of been my three gripes about the Dorpers. And those were three things that he listed without me telling him. He listed as the Australian whites would be better than the Dorpers. So for whatever that's worth, I found that interesting.
Yeah.
we haven't had an issue with them shedding. I mean, yeah, they look great. They shed off like they should in the summer. Sorry. They do, like, the yearlings have a little bit on their back, but then by the time the next year rolls around, they've already shed that off. So, but yeah, the black points is a big thing that they talk about, like the black feet instead of white, and we've seen that in our Australian whites as well.
Yeah. I'm curious, what data or what did you have to select what genetics you're buying as far as these embryos you brought in?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot. I would love to have, more data on, like, what the parents are like. We're just trusting the developer of the breed, Graham, sending us over the best genetics that we can. Last year when we had a tank come over, it wasn't the newest set of genetics. Since then, he has put a shipping or an exporter on his farm. And so this last year we were able to get the newest genetics because he was comfortable sending them straight from his farm, exporting them over to the United States. They didn't have to go to a different place in Australia. So, yeah, we're essentially trusting that he's sending us the best thing. And the breed association is trying to do our best, or just one of the people, but we're trying to do our best to reflect back on what he developed the breed for and like what his goals with the breed were, and try to cull for that with what we have in the United States, or always try to go back to what he wanted.
Sure. Makes sense.
Which
So
is going to be hard when you're doing a breed out program, and like, you know, it's
Yeah.
there's going to be more people here soon that get more genetics, and what is that going to look like? I'm glad I don't get paid the big bucks to be on the the board and stuff. You know, nobody gets paid, but
Yeah. Yeah,
So
and
no,
I mean, some of that'll happen on the commercial side where they won't care anyway. Yeah, they're going to be breeding in different breeds, crossbreeding, and that's fine. Um, yeah, yeah, and you'll be able to bring in enough embryos to kind of keep that standard, and you'll probably already do or will have producers flushing use in the United States to multiply those embryos as well. So,
yeah.
yeah. So anything else you want to tell us about the breed, or tell us a little bit about your management system?
yeah.
Yeah. We do everything pasture based. So, we have our farm set up to where it's high tensile, and we were doing poly. I don't know. Do you guys run on pasture most of the time?
Yeah, we do both. We have in
Okay.
the barn most of the time and on pasture most of the time. So.
Okay, there you go.
I do some rotational grazing.
Leanne does rotational grazing most of the time until their winter sets in and they get buried in snow.
Yeah, I'm up near Lake Erie, the far northwest corner of Pennsylvania, so we get a lot of lake effect snow.
Oh, wow.
So usually from about April till Thanksgiving, or somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas, is about when we got to quit.
And you bring them like
Then we have a hoop building we put them in for the winter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And you don't have problems with parasite load on them, or do you worm?
I don't deworm, no. I mean,
okay.
It's been 8 years at least since we ran through a chute and dewormed. It's a typical. I might have to pull one in, a yearling ewe or something, and give her a chance. But for the most part, we just have very little trouble anymore.
Good, cool. That's what you hear about the Catons.
Yeah, combination of selection pressure, and I mean a good grazing program goes a long way too. But yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't know with them being in that barn. I mean, you have hay down, I'm sure, but
yeah, but you have basically no parasite problems in the barn as long as they're not grazing. You have almost zero. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, new sheep producer question. I'm gonna sneak these questions in.
That's fine.
But yeah, we're on pasture all the time. We've just brought them down to the trees and stuff when we get like some heavy wind or snow. We did just start doing netting though, electric netting, just because we were tired of them being stinkers and like jumping out of. I take the time to put up 3 hot wires and then you're gonna still jump over it. I don't think so. So we went to like lockdown. We also try to have them graze pretty heavy. Even though we rotationally graze, we want them to eat everything in that paddock or eat a lot of it before we move them on, instead of just taking the goodie out of it. So
have you experimented with like higher density? I know you don't have 150 animals or whatever, but like have you experimented in locking that section tighter and seeing what they can do?
Well, we've done Jaime Elizondo's high density grazing or total grazing. We've done that with our cows, but we haven't done it with the sheep. That's a goal. We actually want to combine the sheep, do a flurd, And I mean, we'll have like 20 cows, like, so it won't be as great of pressure, but we only have about 100 ewes right now. But that's the goal. I mean, we want to try to total graze as much as we can, or like get a higher impact on it. My husband could speak more to that. He does. I just he tells me what to do, or he's watching the grass and stuff, and I'm like, okay, I'll set the netting up this way, kind of a
Yeah.
thing.
Well,
Yeah.
I didn't realize you had that many, so you could definitely make an impact with 100 animals.
Yeah.
I know I have had a lot of fun experimenting with tightening that section down and, getting them in and out in a shorter amount of time. But you start getting that concentration a lot tighter. That competition factor, like if I don't eat it, the next one's going to, and then they will eat things you didn't think they would eat, and it actually almost seems like they learn to like it. And
But have you found that I mean, if you're doing that, are you doing it on poly braid, out in the
yeah,
pasture?
yeah.
Okay.
I don't use any electric netting unless it's a high pressure area, like close to my wife's garden or something like that. But I have high tensile perimeter fence. Then I just use poly wire with geared reels to divide it up.
Okay. Our biggest thing is we have 4 little kids. And then also the cows right now. So trying to divide our time, it's like, well, it's easier to go out every 2 days and move the sheep than move them every day. But have you noticed that, like, being super consistent with them with that poly, that they won't jump? Or how many are you doing? Are you just doing 2, or hopefully not doing 3 like us?
So sometimes I can get by with 1. Actually,
Okay.
if I really work it right, I can get by with 1. But it seems like every summer I go through a little spell where you get an animal that starts going through, and once they start, I feel like I have to go back. I'll go to 2. Every now and then, I guess I've done 3, maybe because I was determined I was going to fix this problem. Basically, just reinforce it, like, this is a fence, this is shocking, you don't go through this. And you kind of reset them, and usually I can go back to 1. There's a couple things that I have learned, though, is you got to move them before they run out. And you have to have your next section set up before they run out. If you walk out there, step across that wire and go to start unrolling that next section, forget it. As soon as they will, because once 1 sheep goes across that wire, they're all mobbed up against that fence. The first 2 know they went across the wire, and the next don't know they went across anything. They're just, it's like you open the floodgate and they roll right across that wire, tripping over it and carrying on. They don't even, some get shocked, some don't. So that thing of having the next section ready and moving them right when they're still happy, they're not like hungry yet. That's a couple of things that I think really helps.
Well, and you also need a really good shocker. We were really dry for our area, and man, I had some ewes out grazing a hayfield, and they just did not want to stay in. It just didn't conduct good enough with the being that dry, and I probably don't have my fencer grounded like I should have, because it's typically not an issue for us. We get 50 inches of rain a year, but that makes a big difference, is how dry it is, how well it conducts, I've found.
So I have a 20 or 23 joule fencer, which is, if you look at the specifications for the amount of pasture I have, it's overkill, I know. But it does shock well, and you're supposed to, I think I have 6 ground rods on it. What do they tell you? So many ground rods for, I can't say off the top of my head, but that's a mistake I see people make. And a good quality poly braid makes a difference. I don't know what poly braid are you using?
I don't know. It's probably, like, we have a really nice fence charger too. So it's probably the higher quality stuff. I don't know exactly which one it is.
That does make a big difference. There's some cheap ones out there.
We've been trying to figure out how to navigate, having the whole farm fenced. Currently, we're fenced for cows, so it's up by your hip. And then when you drop it to a high tensile to sheep, you do we're doing 3 wires. And the first one, I don't remember what my husband put it at. It's 6 or so inches off the ground, maybe a little bit higher than that. And trying to keep all the farm clear, like of load from the grass. And so we're always doing experiments. But we just bought a mower for the back of our tractor that's like offset. And so we're going to try that to go underneath those fence lines. I don't know how it's going to go. I hope it goes good. I'll put it on YouTube if anybody wants to watch this summer.
Yeah.
That is a problem.
Yeah. At 560 acres, and we're not just on the perimeter fencing it. We have so many fences interior to, how do you manage all of that without weed whacking the whole thing?
Yeah.
So your lambing, we didn't talk much about your lambing in, did you say May? So when's your spring green up happen?
I think I think like the end of March, April.
Okay. Yeah. So you're ahead of us by a little bit. So that's meaning that you're lambing, you're at your peak forage when your lambs are really starting to kick in and need good milk production. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anything else questions you have, Matt, or anything else you want to cover?
No, I don't think we covered it pretty good.
Yeah. Well,
what an interesting episode. Everybody gets to hear about AI, embryo transfers, new sheep. I guess the only thing that I would say with the Australian whites is I wish you guys could go see some in person and just tell me what you think, or you'll have to email me and let me know. Because that's what I've heard over and over. They're like, when you see them in person, you're like, okay, yeah, this sheep's different. It's not, I don't know. It might be everything that they say it is.
What that does remind me of something I was going to ask you, is what you talked a little bit about, how if they gain like you're expecting them to gain, what are those expectations that you would get them to market weight, or how fast they would gain?
That's what I wish I could speak more on that. Our 2 ram lambs that we had, they were 3 months old, and we pulled them off their moms, and I think they were like 85 pounds, like compared to our Catons. And we have everything, or this last year we had everything on warm season grasses. So we were not treating them the best, I guess. Sure. But yeah, they just grew so much better than our Katahdin our Katahdin lambs did. So, and then even the ewes, they're just a lot bigger than our Katahdins are.
And you're not grain feeding or anything that's on grass, or do you creek feed them?
No, that's on grass. And I guess when we wean them, sometimes we'll give them a little bit of grain for a supplement and kind of some extra energy. And then we do supplement with a little bit of grain and then alfalfa and stuff in the winter time. So, yeah.
Sounds, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds good.
Let's hear just a little bit about your podcast yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm obviously new to sheep. And so I was telling somebody else, I was like, well, I'm either going to have these conversations with people, like just calling them up on the phone, or I'm going to do a podcast. And, my husband thought I was crazy. He's like, what? I'm like, it's just going to be an hour conversation. It'll be fine. Like, just talking sheep. Come on. What's wrong? And so, yeah, it's just been great so far. I've only done, I just uploaded my 12th episode. A few of them are biased. They're on Australian white breeders. But I want to help other people learn more about the sheep industry in the Midwest, like how to build a profitable sheep flock. Because a lot of people out here are cattle people. And I know that sheep can be profitable. It's just how do you, I don't know, how do you do that? So I'm the one bold enough, I guess, to to do some Zoom calls and call people and then put it on YouTube. Crazy person.
Hey, that's good.
That's a great perk of being a podcaster is you get to have all these cool conversations with people from all over, and like you said, conversations you'd love to have anyway. So just make a podcast of it.
Yeah.
So if people want to find you, Kelsey, where's any contacts you want to share? Your website?
Yeah. So I have a YouTube page and it's Balanced Ruminant Grazers. That's also our website. But then my podcast is called Feed the Sheep, and it's just underneath our Balanced Ruminant Grazers. You could just go to the podcast tab and see that, or it's on Apple, Spotify, all that. So yep. We'll have all sorts of different conversations with people I want to do. I'm a nerd with like border collies and stuff. I want to educate myself on adding a border collie to our farm. It's just kind of taking people along for the ride for our sheep flock and how to build a profitable sheep flock. And so, yeah.
Yeah, very good. Well, thanks a lot for coming. Thanks a lot for coming on and telling us more about the Australian whites. And I will put links in the show note to your YouTube channel and your podcast. People want to find you or learn more about you, they can hunt you up there. So thanks again.
Yes, thank you guys.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast. If you got any suggestions for us or you have a topic you'd like to hear about, feel free to let us know. 717-310-3641, or you can send me an email, leon@lostcreekwholesale.net. Thanks, and we'll catch up with you next time.